This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hey guys, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series.
So we've had a really good chat, which started off with one intention and ended up with something even better. We were going to talk about the emotions of the heartbreak, and the emotions involved in heartbreak. But in the end, we had this really cool shift in the conversation with our very special guest, Sarah Louise Ryan, where we ended up talking about how to actually prevent a breakup, how to stop that, how to stop yourself from having that heartbreak.
And it was, we got Sarah on. She's a relationship expert and an international matchmaker. She tries to play down, but she matches people from all over the world together and to bring them together into love. And we kind of planned to talk about, as Ahmed said, is like, how to get over heartbreak and stuff. But what became really obvious was the more important conversation to have was how to kind of stop yourself when you're in a relationship, how to stop your relationship from falling apart, how to keep the love alive, how to keep the communication, how to work through conflict, and also how to bring new fresh ideas and how to reconnect the two of you as partners, like, especially in this time now where, if you're living with your partner, you're living in a space and you're together all the time. Especially if you're working from home, and it can be very difficult to work through that. There's a lot of gripes, and we talk about resentment actually, and I think Sarah comes up with an amazing point around resentment, about what it is and how to kind of clear out resentment from your relationship. And it's very easy for resentment to build in the current kind of life situations we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, and if you're not in a relationship and you're thinking, well, there's no point listening to this podcast, it definitely is, because this is the kind of advice where you really wish you knew this before getting into a relationship and embarking upon a long term, because it's the kind of thing which comes up, right? We end up talking about conflicts and how to work through that, and it's such an important skill to have. And the way that Sarah framed, conflict and resolution was beautiful, really understanding that there's more to just winning a conflict. There's what is that word now? It escapes me.
Compromise.
That's it. Compromise. Yeah, that's the one. There's way more to just like winning the conflict or losing a conflict. There's compromise. There's actually coming together. There's aligning or agreeing separate ways and stuff. And such a beautiful episode, and I really think this is key. I wish this is literally one of those moments where I'm like, I wish I had this sort of information, in my younger years around relationships. That would have been much better, rather than running away from conflicts as a young boy.
Yeah, and I'd say, if you're a man or a woman listening to this, this equally beneficial. And if you do have a partner, listen to this episode on your own and then listen to it together. It's something I found is really amazing in relationship to do, is to listen to podcasts together and then just talk about it afterwards, like your thoughts, your ideas, and whether there's things you want to bring into relationship. Because when you do it together, it's another thing you can do together, is like listen and learn together. I think it's sometimes something that's forgotten in relationship, is you can learn things together. And so if you're in a relationship, grab your partner now, or bookmark this for later, and listen to it together, because you'll get so much out of it. Listen together and you'll learn, and it will also help you. And this is for some of the people that maybe there are some resentments or gripes in your relationship now, and through listening to this episode together, you will automatically be able to voice them and talk about them in a way that's safe and loving.
Beautiful. No, that's a really good point. You've given them a lot to look forward to in this episode.
Yeah. I might even listen back to it myself, to be honest. All right. So without further ado,
let's get into the episode. Yeah, we'll get into it. Let's go.
So today we've got a very special episode. We've got a wonderful woman who we met about a year ago. We appeared on her radio show and had a lot of fun. And we even went for a little drink too not long after that, just talking about life and dating and relationships and everything like that. She is an international matchmaker and a relationship expert, and she seems to be featuring in all sorts of publications at the moment. And it's Sarah Louise Ryan.
Hey guys, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I'm delighted to be here. I can't wait to have a chat with you guys. I've been having a bit of downtime lately, tuning into your podcasts, which often don't take a slice of time out for myself to listen to podcasts. And yeah, really enjoyed the series lately. Quite a lot. I pour myself a bubble bath and mint tea, tune in, and so here I am joining you. I'm excited.
Beautiful, beautiful. I don't have enough mint tea or bubble baths these days, to be honest, myself.
Yeah, we should all be making so much more time for it, shouldn't we?
Yeah. You think that with this being very homebound as we are now, we'd all magically have more time. But I feel like my life's the opposite. I feel like I have less time than I had before.
Working yourself really hard, getting up in the mornings, working, filling your time.
Maybe I'm sleeping too much.
I doubt that.
uh, and AJ, how have you been recently, AJ?
I'm good, man. Yeah. To be fair, I'm all good. I feel like I've been balancing this work-life lockdown ratio quite well. Yeah.
Maybe we should do an episode on that one, and you can
Sure.
you can take the lead on that.
Yeah, starts with meditation. Starts with grounding yourself in the morning. But yeah, no, I'm really good.
Good. So today we're going to talk about the pain of heartbreak because it's something that I think every one of you listeners has probably dealt with at some point in your life. Going through heartbreak is difficult. When you see it coming as well. When you're in a relationship and you see the heartbreak coming, or even when you're not in a relationship yet with someone and you just feel really deeply for them and your heart is broken. And there's also the process of kind of getting over that. And it's like all those things no one teaches you how to spot when it's happening. No one teaches you what to do when you break up, and you hear all these kind of old wives and gentlemen tales of what you should do. I think one of the most common one for men is like, you should get yourself back in the game and get out there, which isn't always the best advice. But yeah, we're going to delve into why people break up, like how to deal with it yourself, how to deal with the emotions, and how to work through those and process those, because that's a really important process that you need to go through. And we have a wonderful expert with us, Sarah, who is an absolute expert in these areas.
Thank you very much for saying so. Also, it doesn't matter what kind of expert you are. We're only human in the dating industry, and I've written quite extensively about my own personal stories relative to heartbreak, and even myself. I can talk about breakups, and I can talk about how to navigate the path forward thereafter. But unless you really experience like the true pain, the physical pain and the emotional pain of a heartbreak, I feel that all you can do is talk about it, but not from a place of knowing, place of strategizing a stronger you out of a dark place. And I remember in 2016 I went through a really heavy breakup that just I'd never saw coming, and I obviously talked about breakups all day every day and finding love again and dating after divorce. But after that breakup itself, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been an imposter. I've been an absolute imposter. I've not known the real physical pain. The broken heart syndrome, is what it's called, that can come with a breakup of losing true love. And that was a real personal eye opener for me, which I actually believe, whilst I've been in the dating industry for 10 years, I feel like that was the re-energizer and a kickstart in my career, even though I was already 6 years into doing what I do now. And that's when I felt like I really knew what love was, and I really knew what loss of love was. And that's when I started to write about dating quite intricately and healing a broken heart. So, yeah, from personal experiences more so than professional experiences, I would say.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's fair to say that pretty much everyone, we all experience heartbreak. Like as soon as we started talking about this topic, my mind goes back to the first time that I really ever experienced this, and obviously younger at the time, but like a devastating impact on how I felt, and absolutely no idea. There's no manual for this, or it doesn't even matter if people give you advice really at the time. The emotional experience is very strong.
It's funny when you said that. I've went back to my first like major heartbreak as a 17-year-old, and you literally feel like the world's. And I remember at the time thinking like, the world was going to end. The world is never going to be the same again. And fast forward 20 years. Wow, 20 years almost since that. And I almost have a very different kind of opinion towards like relationships ending. I've had numerous relationships end in that 20-year span. And almost you come to your own strategies, don't you? Of like, oh, what to do afterwards, how to deal with it, and you kind of evolve it each time. But I want to start off actually with something we were talking about just before we got on, Sarah. You were saying how you felt that, quite a few of your clients were coming to you and saying that they were having their relationships break down at this difficult year that we've had, living in and out of lockdown. Um, and what do you feel that's kind of causing that for people?
It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and talking about a lot. And I actually came to a conclusion about it just yesterday morning that the answer is, I believe, that in couples we're losing our separateness. And our separateness is what really drives us to be attracted to somebody in the first instance, in those early days of dating when we first become attracted to somebody. We are so in awe of their differences, their uniqueness, that we always find ourselves in a steady flow of conversation about what's so different about them that attracts us to them. And then when we find ourselves in these surreal circumstances that we really can't plan for, or, you know, strategize a way a way forward, we can only, cope day to day and focus on what's in our control. But what we're losing as romantic couples is our sense of separateness, which creates the spark of desire. So we we want to attach to someone in the first days. So we are constantly talking about our differences to find the common ground, and it's making us, emotionally and mentally and physically desire them, and to, it's that kind of constant seek and reward in conversing with them on text, on calls, and in person on dates. When we live together or we're locked down together, whether it's a relationship that's been, a year or 2 or 10 years, we're spending so much time, but the time together isn't of quality because we're not connecting on a deep level. We're talking about the mundane day-to-day life of, have you put the washing in? How was your Zoom call? Have you taken the dog out? Shall I do that? So there's all of those things. And the spark of desire is somewhat dimmed because we lose, I guess, independence, which is what makes us attractive too. And we're codependent and having a loss of separateness, which is dimming the spark. That's my answer to what is happening right now. And I guess when you feel like you've come to an answer, naturally we try and seek a solution. And I just think, okay, so how can couples overcome this? How can new couples or established couples or whatever, how can they seek that spark and flame that desire that needs to be fanned, to keep us intimate, physically, emotionally, intellectually. And I think it's in the day creating physical space. So, you know, physical space where you work separately, you do your things, you practice your passions, you work on what really makes you you and keeps you on your toes, and then you come together in really quality connected time and conversation with your partner, and then you start to separate the mundane and bring that spark back. That's what I think.
Mm. No, it's a really good point. It's like the separateness is like something I've experienced in my relationship over the last, like 8, 9 months. I really lose track of what month I'm in, how
Mm.
long the year has been. Um, but it's just like, as you talk about, it's like we've sat often just on my dining table in my front room, opposite each other working. So I'm on Zoom with my company, she's on Zoom with hers. You know, I'm in my world of my calls. I'm maybe listening to music, but you're in the same energy field as each other constantly. You don't have that separateness as you described it. And it is, you just have these mundane conversations like, what do you want to eat? Oh, okay, I'm gonna eat that. And then you have the mundane annoyances as well that come up. I think
Mm.
it's like, oh, she's done that thing again. Oh, she didn't close the door in the bathroom. Oh, this is a really personal one. Or like, oh, she's cooked the food in a certain way that I don't like. But it's these tiny mundane annoyances. But when you're in that bubble of just being together all the time, that small thing feels like it's something massive. And it's like, you end up in this way where I think, and I come from the tantric point of view, is that within tantra they have this idea of something called polarity, which is very much like two opposite poles of magnets are attracted to each other if they stay in their opposite field of like plus and minus. But when you leave them together too long, they lose all charge, so they have no attraction to each other. They just become quite innate objects. So to like delve into what you were saying is like having that separateness actually creates that charge between us, and as you said, the differences. And but also added to that within the tantric realms, is they talk about, for a masculine man to be very much in his masculine energy, and for a feminine woman to be very much in her feminine energy, and that creates the spark between
Mm.
two people. And I really see, when you're spending all your time together, you don't have the opportunity to be in that separate energy, because you're always together. You're always thinking about your housework and tidying up and what they're doing, and what you don't get to. And as you put it really well, is like, go and pursue the things that you love that bring the joy back into a relationship. And it's so easy to just, like you said, become quite codependent as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think for me, like when I reflect on just my relationship with Chloe as well, it's like I think the fortunate thing is we spot exactly what you're talking about, or rather, I mean, let me put it another way. I think we're sensitive to exactly what you're talking about. Like we're very sensitive to the amount of time or the mundane, or actually what we defined it as for ourselves was a lack of presence, was a lack of presence to my partner, and a lack of like actual intimacy, because then
Mm,
you're constantly in each other's space. And what what I learned, I suppose, getting into a relationship was this is now like an intensified version of what it is to enter into a relationship from a single person's point of view, where you're two people coming together and sharing more and more time together. And if you live together, then that space that you once had when you used to be single and used to come and meet is now has changed. And so you have to adapt to the fact that there's a different structure, and now we're existing in a structure, was as you said, like more time together, in the same space, having the same conversations, that it creates a tension that just keeps
mm,
rising. And I would add as well that I think was to sort of like exacerbate the problem is the tension outside at the moment, like the concern, the fears, the worries that everyone has, and then not knowing how to communicate that with each other, and then this creating more problems in a relationship.
yeah, yeah, no, it's exactly what I've seen. Is like, it's just really, it's a really tricky time, isn't it? Because it's very easy to get into conflict as well, because you're always together and you're
Yeah.
not having that time alone. It's very tricky. It's like something that I've had to kind of engineer quite deliberately, is like taking time apart.
Hmm.
Like, okay, I'm going to go and see some of my friends for an afternoon in the park, or depending on what point in lockdown we're existing in. It's like, I'm going to remove myself from this for a period of time that's a decent amount of time, like an 8 hour stretch, 12 hours even, and go and do my own thing in my own way. And I'm not going to be in contact with you. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing every hour in the same way we would if we're in the same space. So at least when I come back, there's something exciting to talk about. Like, oh, I did this today. I did these things today, something new, something different. And you're not feeling like you're just always having the same conversation. There's nothing kind of new for the two of you to kind of bring to the table.
I thought it was really interesting earlier, AJ. You were talking about how you and Chloe are quite sensitive to those conversations and really in tune and aware, and then you bring it to the forefront. If it's at the forefront of your mind, you bring it to the forefront of conversation. And as a couple, I think that's so, necessary. And I think I would describe that as being conscious. Like, you're so conscious equally as are you, David. Like, just so in tune. We were talking a little bit earlier about how, you know, about when men go through breakups, they often think about, moving on, or, and they don't always sit through the motions. I know that you both have talked about that you would and have, but it's always like a matter of trying to find a solution all of the time. And I think when you just kind of sit with it for a moment and just think, what is going on here? How do I feel? What am I consciously kind of trying to address in my relationship that is working or isn't working? And then just sitting and having those connected conversations as a couple is just so essential. And I think this period of lockdown, we've all found a way to get so in our heads. I mean, obviously, we've been in it long enough now, we should be coming out of it, but, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Strategizing a way to navigate it a little bit better for sure. But I think couples that are kind of either, just ignoring it and brushing it under the carpet and hoping it will go away is it's just a plaster, isn't it? It's just a plaster over something, and just having those conscious conversations around, okay, are we codependent here? What can we do differently to really shake things up? Do we need a little bit of time apart, physically in the same four walls, I mean, and then, really throw ourselves into what our passions are. Or if we feel like we've lost them, because we're constantly trying to find common ground in our coupledom, how can we reestablish what those interests are, and how can we pursue them, and how can I spend more time with other people? I just think, you say it's sensitivity, but for me that's like a really high level of consciousness in a relationship. And I think it's nice to hear, and it's refreshing, because like I was saying earlier, I'm hearing so many couples breaking up during this time, and we need to shake up the way things are happening in this lockdown, almost, to save so many incredible couples too.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's like David said. I mean, his particular structure of creating that time, it really depends on each person. And I think having that awareness of what your personal needs are, and noticing where those boundaries are getting crossed and you're getting cross, I think that's such an important factor. Like we were saying in regards to like men and breakups, and I mean, I'm sure some women have this problem too as well. Is like really being able to identify what the real feelings are that we're having, in order to actually process and actually move on, as opposed to, I don't want to feel this way, or I don't want to think about this anymore. I just want to move the hell on out of the situation and into something new where I feel good again. Which I think is what a lot of people, a lot of men particularly, we know, do this. So yeah.
It's really easy to,
I guess.
I think, it's
Go
really
on.
easy to like just hide, because, or avoid, because it's like, it's very easy to see that there's something wrong in your relationship and be like, okay, there's something here that's not quite right. There's something that doesn't feel quite right, but I don't really want to deal with it because it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. I have to communicate. I might get upset. I might get angry, and all those things. And actually, then what we do is we actually just move into a process of avoidance, and we often, for a lot of us, our avoidance strategies are, it can be drinking sometimes, it can be drugs, it can be work, it can be exercise. It's wherever you go to just be like, this is my safe place. I understand what's going on over here. I can kind of pretend that this issue I've got in my relationship isn't happening. And I think one of the things that's kind of been removed from us during the lockdown is, most of us are not going into an office, into work. Many people for a long time couldn't go to the gym. You couldn't see friends and family. So the issues in your relationship you couldn't hide from because they were just in front of you constantly. And I think for some people, just not having the kind of the tools to communicate and work through them, the emotions of it, and also work through the issues, has probably caused them to, you know, to split up and come apart from their partners.
I heard something the other day that was so simple, but it was so profound all in the same breath. It was, they're called feelings because we're supposed to feel every single one of them. And we can often, as human beings, just like push and force ourselves into a place of happiness, whether that means breaking up with someone or whether it means pushing, everything down and under the carpet, hoping it will go away. There's the two sides of the coin there, but it's essentially like pushing the feelings away, hoping that we'll find happiness. But ultimate happiness is like the monks, isn't it? It's contentment. It's a place of feeling content in your relationship, content on your own, content with your partner, just feeling content. And I think we're often trying to push through, grief or avoidance or doubt or fear just to get to a place of happiness rather than really sitting with those feelings and feeling it and getting to grips with it and trying to learn from it about ourselves, about our partner, about our relationship. And, part of that pushing away can often be avoidance, as you were saying, David. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I just see it a lot, and I see it myself actually sometimes. I think that's where I try and do a lot. It's like, I'm annoyed about something. Am I talking about it? Am I having a conversation? Am I trying to communicate it? And my default mode of being, and has been for many years, is to just shut down. It's like, I'm emotionally triggered. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to stop talking. And I kind of disguise it to myself as, I need to think about what I want to say before I say it because I don't want to get it wrong. And I have to like very deliberately, very consciously be like, okay, I'm annoyed about something. I need to communicate this in a way that is like becoming of the adult that I am, so that you know we can actually work through this and talk about it. Because otherwise, it's just very easy to just avoid and go, it's not an issue. It'll go away in 5 minutes. It'll go away in a couple of days, and it affects so many aspects of the relationship. It's like I think you touched on earlier, Sarah, about intimacy, and it's something that I've done a few workshops with men um, over the last few months around this, and you talk to guys, and it seems to be this recurring pattern for men in relationships that there comes some point in a relationship where the sexual intimacy stops. They have some grievance, they're upset about it, and it's often that I see is that there's an emotional problem, or there's some sort of conflict that's not being dealt with, that starts to impact upon the sexual intimacy. Because when we don't feel safe as people with each other emotionally, it's like, how can you open up sexually to someone and be in that space with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, connectivity doesn't just come down to addressing feelings that are being suppressed or in our gut around our relationships, but it's also, being clear on what intimacy is, and is it, if if it's fallen by the wayside in conversation or in the bedroom, it's all connected. It's all part of package and parcel of being in a relationship. And it's not, it's the unspoken things as well as the spoken things that really matter. And often it's like, oh, well, we're talking, but we're not being intimate, or we're being intimate and we're not really talking. It's, well, actually, they have to be in parallel, with one another for it to be a strong relationship. And you were saying before about, avoiding a topic because you can't find the words, or you don't know what it is, or you're just not ready for it yet. Well, if there are cracks in a relationship, the more you avoid having a conversation about it, the bigger those cracks are going to become, and before you know it, you're going to have a whole valley. It's the Grand Canyon between the two of you, and you'll find it harder to find your way back to one another. It's like as soon as you find a crack or you feel like something isn't being addressed, you ought to address it. And in my relationship coaching, I often talk about conflict and resolution, and what happens there is people often think, oh, conflict, I need to figure out the art of negotiation at work, and that's what conflict is, or in a difficult situation, a formal legal situation. But actually, conflict can come in communication in all relationships, not just romantically speaking. And if you don't really understand the structure of whether you want to accommodate or avoid or meet in the middle and collaborate with someone to compromise, well, actually, all you're ever going to do is win or lose. You're not going to compromise because you don't have the tools. And so I think understanding what communication skills are necessary to make a relationship kind of run the distance um, is so key. And as we were saying before, we're not taught those things. We don't know, or unless we're conscious about deepening our relationships, or you work in the field of dating and relationships, it's often not at the forefront of somebody's mind to go and look into something like that. Okay, so me and my partner are having a conflict. Do I know how to deal with that? Do I know how to compromise to bring us both to the same page? Even if it means me losing a little bit, but actually in the end, I will win because my relationship still has the stability that it needs to go the distance. So I think that's also a really interesting topic as well, conflict and resolution in couples.
Yeah, I find with conflict that we had a pretty good post, Dave. I think you wrote a nice post about conflict and intimacy. I think, and it's something that I've experienced over time. I'm massively conflict averse in general. I'm a great person to have as like a mediator in the middle. I can see both sides and all these things. So when it comes to dealing with conflict, even in my own relationship, my first port of call is to like, let me sit on this, like let me think about this, right? And it's only through experience that I've come to learn that I need to voice things, I need to express. And I know if this is my experience, and this is probably the experience for a lot of people out there, is like, we it's like you say, we have this small crack, but then we don't look at it. We're like, well, we'll leave that till later, and then it turns into a canyon, right? And what my feeling is from my own experience is like when I leave something unsaid, and then a week passes, a month passes, and then the more time that goes past, initially it's like, oh, I should say something, and then I don't, and oh, I should say something, and then I don't. And then by the time it comes out, it feels like such a big thing emotionally because I've kept it down, that even the way in which I communicate it is expecting an explosion, if I can communicate, or if it comes out another way, even worse. Like it's, if someone else finds out, and then it's just like, well, why were you hiding? Then there's a suspicion, even if it was just shame or guilt or just a sense of like, oh, I don't feel comfortable sharing this. So yeah, I've learned through experience that it's if I start getting that niggling voice, like, oh, there's something that's going on and I am not talking about it, that at some point I need to take the jump. There's a small crack, take the jump over the crack now, like jump now, and oh, this is what's going on, just because if I don't, like, yeah, it, and as you say, and so yeah, it creates separation. But what I've found over time as well, when you have a problem and you're able to communicate, and yes, there's conflict and you work through it. My personal feel at the moment is, given I know there's different types of conflict, but there's a certain level to which it actually brings you closer. Like after conflict, you feel you've shared, you've opened up, you've been vulnerable, you've bared your emotions, how you really feel about something. They've shared how they really feel, and then you come to a compromise or a solution, and you're like, oh, now I feel closer to you. I don't have this connection with other people. So it's a surprising gift of conflict, like when you're able to actually express yourself and deal with the conflict head on.
and I completely agree that, in that space of vulnerability and sharing something that isn't serving you in your relationship can bring such a shift to a deeper level of connection. As as big or small as we may have made it in our heads, just by sharing, we can find a way out together, or we can go our separate ways. No, I don't mean by separating, just emotionally in the relationship, we're not on the same page. And I think it's interesting what you were saying about, if something's been a bit of a niggle in your mind, if the longer you leave it, it's almost like a poison. It's like a toxic energy, because you can't push it away, because it's a niggle that's kind of just taking up so much space. And I think by holding things in, that can take up more energy by just letting them out and sharing how we really feel. And when we keep those things in, we're chipping away at our integrity, aren't we, to ourselves? And we've got to be our own best friends. And we're not being authentic to ourselves by just saying, okay, well, that might upset that person, so I'm not going to share it with them. Or the the outcome of having that conversation is worrying me, and I'm so fearful of it that actually I'd rather just not be integral to myself and keep all of this poisonous energy inside of me. And then it'll either come out in an explosion because I've suppressed it for so long and it's only got one way to go, or I will just keep living inauthentically in my relationship. Like, they're the options, really.
It's like, as you say, like it really builds up. Like I know for me, I'm not too dissimilar from Ahmad. Is like I don't want conflict. I want to be able to like smooth it. I want life to be nice and easy. We all cool and we all happy. We all have fun. Um, but unfortunately, there's conflict in life, and in relationship, it's that it's just trying to open your mouth and say there's this issue, or I'm worried about this, or whatever it is. And I think when I think of the post that AJ was talking about, I think I called it kind of conflict to connection, because it's like what we don't realize is sometimes in explaining what's wrong, explaining what's an inner conflict for us, or a conflict in the relationship, is it gives you an opportunity to voice how you feel, what your fears and what your worries are, right? And what you would really love for your relationship, and those are the things that sort of vulnerability really connects us to our partners, because we allow them to see parts of us that they may not normally see on a day-to-day basis. They may get understanding of our worries and our fears that are kind of born out of our beliefs that we've kind of brought through our lives because of our life experience. And when you kind of share that with someone else, it allows you to really feel a lot more connected to your partner. But our incorrect assumption is, if we tell our partner about these beliefs that we have, that they will shame us, they will think that we're lesser than, or they will think that we're not as good partners as maybe they thought we were initially.
Well, I'd also say as well, like one of my biggest things in the past around conflict is conflict equaled a breakup to me. So the idea of like sharing something that could potentially cause a breakup, like hence I avoid it, and so that's a huge one that I know definitely worried me a lot in the past, was creating a breakup. Like, oh my god, if I do this, she's going to leave me.
So interesting. We're not really taught, or we don't really delve into how to have these conversations from a really loving place of care. But by not having those conversations, we're not coming from a place of love for ourselves. We're just saying, actually, your feelings and your thoughts around X, Y, and Z, they're not valid, or they don't matter enough right now. The outcome of the situation matters more, or your partner's feelings matter more. And I think I think it's important that we say no more, because then we connect quicker, we fail faster, we learn quicker. Um, and I think you and I have spoken about it before. I'm a massive fan of failure, and the learnings that can come from that, can really take us to the next level in love and in life and in everything in general. And I think I after that major breakup that we spoke about earlier that I experienced in my personal life, I became more of a no person and failed quicker in love and in business, and I learned quicker and I became stronger from it. And I'm not saying, seek conflict wherever you go like a bull in a china shop. I am saying that, if you feel something, I mean, it's always on my face anyway. I'm the most expressive person that you'll meet. I'm like, I don't really get that, or I might not be saying it, but you can see it on my face. So any partners that I've had, you know, have pretty much known that I'm disagreeable about something anyway. So the conflict doesn't necessarily need to come in conversation. It can be non-verbal. And I think, when you're in a relationship and there's deep love and there's deep care, intuitively, I think we do know when something isn't quite right, or when something is untoward or not being said, because we can often, I'm not saying just assume you know your partner in and out and that you've merged into one person, but our gut and our intuition often tells us when something isn't quite right. And if it's not being communicated, we should become know people and speak up, because then we're being more integral to what we need and what we want, and showing up as our, most loving selves for ourselves.
Yeah, I like that perspective, and it's so true. Like so often we're focused on not losing someone else or not upsetting someone else, or the dynamic with us and another, and we're not taking into account ourselves, which is actually then perpetuates the frustrations that we feel that we can't be, we just can't be. We have to be something other than who we are. Such a big factor. It's fascinating. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've actually spoken a lot more about how to avoid a heartbreak than about heartbreaks so far. I was like, oh, this is really good. This is
And then
like
about the
really good.
pain.
Yeah. How to even avoid like getting to that point. If you feel the stress and strain in your relationship, this is a powerful conversation in that respect.
I was feeling that as well. I was like, oh, the conversation is great. It's really perfect because I think it's funny because actually the next thing I was going to say is, as a couple, like how do you keep things kind of fresh? How do you keep the lines of communication open? How do you we talk about mental health a lot at the moment, right? And I often say we talk about what to do when people are in crisis, like when you're in a mental health crisis, what you should do, blah blah blah. But what we don't hear as much conversation is like, how do we make sure we never get to the point of being in crisis? How do you keep kind of good relationship health?
Yeah, I think it starts with um, noticing those cracks before they do become canyons in your relationship. I think it's the first the first step really is consciousness and being aware, and really not just showing up for yourself, but showing up for your relationship and being integral to that, and just thinking, actually, we only get one life and it's short. And I know that's might come across as dramatic to some listeners, but actually, I'm a massive advocate for that. Life is short. We know how fragile it is right now, for sure. And so, if you're not happy and you feel like your relationship isn't serving you, or something on a disconnect with your partner, just really sit with it and bring yourself to a conscious awareness about it and thinking, okay, well, now I feel aware that something isn't quite right. Let me sit and have a low pressure conversation about it. I think people, as we were saying earlier, in relationships often think that bringing difficult conversations to the table are going to result in some massive, be all and end all situation. But actually, it could, if it comes from a loving place, be a conversation where, the other party says, actually, I feel the same. Something isn't feeling quite right.
Mm,
How can I, and it's not using the word you, it's saying I or
yeah.
we aren't quite connected, not so sure what it is. It's changing the language and then changing the narrative of the relationship. And making that happen, by having a cup of tea together, bringing it up where the time feels right, rather than they've just walked through the door or they've just finished on their 5 or 6 o'clock Zoom and saying, actually, knife and fork down the table, this isn't working, or whatever. It's about how you really show up for your relationship. And if you want it to work, doing it from a space and a place of love. And then I would say the step to take after that would be to create a strategy together rather than one person, you know, creating the narrative of how they feel it should go. It's like, well, actually, it's not just taking two to tango in a relationship, but you're a partnership. You're in a relationship with somebody who's your best friend. Like, that is the be all and end all of it. If you're not speaking to your partner like they are your best friend, the friendship is lost. And that is so key for a long lasting love, you know. And I think a lot of people have lost that during lockdown, just remembering the person that you're sharing the space with, romantically or physically or whatever, they are your best friend, and you need to speak to them from a place of kindness, if indeed you still want them to be your best friend. And all the intimacy that comes after that is really a bonus, because you're sharing yourself with somebody, and they're sharing, you know, you shouldn't take that for granted. How would you speak to your friend? Speak to them in that way, and hopefully you'll come to a strategy, you know, to move forward. And I think when the friendship is lost, or even the way you would speak to a friend is lost, that kind of language, that's when resent builds, and that's when there's no going, you can't really go back from resentment. That's another toxic energy, isn't it? And then from strategy, that's when you start creating the fun and the playfulness and the spontaneity that moves to that desire and spark and reconnection.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't. That's really well said, actually. Really beautiful, because it's so easy to avoid. And then, like you said, resentment is a really, it's like a real parasite, you know, it really eats away at you, that resentment. When you build, when that gets created in a relationship, and there's a, I don't even know what the kind of critical mass for what is, but I've had it in relationships where there's a resentment towards your partner, and then once it gets to a certain size, it's like you can just not get. I've never been able to get past it. You know, it's like you need to always be. It's almost like you want to do something where you can clear out those sorts of resentments very regularly. Like it's something me and my partner do actually is we have like a monthly relationship review. So we sit down and we have a few questions that we talk about. We have some points that we always go over, but it gives us a really good opportunity every month to go over any small niggles or any small resentments that have built up. You know, anything that hasn't gone well. But we also talk about the beautiful things, the things that have gone really well, what we'd like to do more of. And I found this to be a really good structure, and I was very resistant to it initially. I won't lie, but actually, it really enabled us to communicate about these things and think. And when you, one of the fear often is like, oh, if you have these conversations, it's going to be like an hour of us saying what's wrong, when actually, you know, we usually allot like 2 hours for it, but usually we probably spend maybe 5 minutes talking about what's wrong, and the rest of the time we're talking about, you know, all the things we've enjoyed doing, what we'd love to do together, and like making great plans, and like a lot of beautiful things come out of it. um and that's been an amazing learning for me. And it's like it's allowed us to do lots of new things, because it's been like, oh, we tried this one thing, we really enjoyed it, so we look for more things like that. Yeah, let's do more of that. And it's like allowed us to kind of explore in areas of our relationship that in past relationships I've never even kind of got to.
Amazing,
I think
man.
that's
That
such a unique approach, isn't it? It's so interesting.
yeah.
I love appraisal.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally like every month sit down. And just like we have, I think it's like 5 or 6 questions, and you know, throughout the month, you just have to be conscious to like, you know, what hasn't gone well. I didn't really like how that turned out. What went really well? So then you sit down with them and you talk them through, and it's really like it's having to hear your partner say what didn't go well for them. Like it fills me with terror. Like every time that we get to that question, I'm like, oh fuck,
Mm.
and then it's usually something, and I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, that didn't go really well. And then we add it, and we'll go through it a little bit more later on, and we'll create like action plans or things we want to do. You know, things that bring us closer, like all these sorts of things. It's a really great structure.
I was just thinking a moment ago about, you know, how one, you know, having that open channel of communication is so important. And even just making that clear that, you know, regularly or on a specific day or bi-weekly, you have these conversations that are constructive to how you both show up for each other is really essential. And I think so many couples do not have that. And a lot of the time, what I'm hearing is that people are using the opportunity to have these gripes or iron out their resentments, so to speak, on date night. So, if you've got the weekly get together, especially couples with children, they would sit and have the conversations about what isn't working at home or with the kids or during lockdown on a time that is specifically, few and far between anyway, the opportunity to get dressed up or just show up for one another romantically, to use that time where you've got the connection to say, hey, here's what's not working. And I think the fact that you do once a month is really strategic and so important. But I think a big fail, I suppose, or learning, if you want to look at it the other way, is that so many couples during lockdown are using the time where they say, hey, let's have a glass of wine or have a meal together, to say, okay, this isn't working for me. And it's just, it loses the fun and the energy of playfulness that a relationship, doesn't matter how old you are, relationship still needs that to thrive.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because I know with any structure, like some people, they hear it and they're like, right, yeah, this sounds good, and then they use it in a way, and it's I could really hear in the way that you're talking about it, David. It's actually, it's not to air gripes or air dramas. It's to actually move things forward in a cohesive way, and I think with that, it's the intention that you have behind it. But yeah, I really like that. There's a saying that people often equate to work, which is like live live like you're going to die tomorrow, work like you're going to live forever. I never really understood the second half of that. What does that mean? Work like you're going to live forever. But in relationships, it's a similar thing, because we hear, like, if you always did what you did at the beginning, then there will never be an end. And I feel like this whole saying is like, if you live with your partner as if today is the last day, like, how would you treat them? It's something that crossed my mind recently while I was having a bath, and but it's, I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to see it, because you never know, like, what your time here on this planet is like, right? And it's like, well, how would you be on your last day? You'd probably be very loving, very forgiving, very compassionate, very understanding. At least, well, that's how I feel I would be. I don't know about you guys, but or the listeners. But you know what I mean, like that feeling of like cherishing the moments, because it crosses my mind. I'm aware of my aloofness, that I can be very detached when I go into my work, and I have to consciously go, how am I being in my relationship? Am I being conscious? Am I showing affection, or have I gone off on an aloof path, and I'm off somewhere in my head? And so that's why that thought came to me, was this whole idea of really taking the time to be present to the person that you with. Now, you mentioned the phrase best friend, and I don't think so far, David, that we often have like considered it, like in a relationship, like, this person is your best friend. They obviously exhibit like such qualities, and that you're spending so much time and you're talking about things and you're very easygoing, and there's, hopefully most of the time you're easygoing, and I know things are really free flowing between the two of you. So you'd really want to cherish that person, right? You wouldn't want to like let that person go, or leave things unsaid, or even allow resentment to build. You'd want to be open and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, or this is what I would like to do right now, or I feel blocked, or I feel stressed, and stuff. So I think it's a really powerful way to see in your relationship, like, this person is a really important person that you've picked to be with, or persons.
Something just came up for me, which was relative to what David was saying earlier. He was kind of saying, how does resentment start? Where does it come from, and how does it, gain such momentum? And off the back of what you were just saying, AJ, it's actually, when you were in the bath thinking about how can you show up for your relationship if it was the last day on earth, with Chloe. And all I could hear was like, oh my gosh, we lose empathy. We lose empathy for the other person that we're with, for the other person in the relationship. And that's how we can't break through resentment. That's how it gets such momentum, and we cease to be able to put ourselves in their shoes and So we feel like they owe us something or the world owes us something, and then it just goes and it just keeps building and getting bigger. And I think if we can work on finding empathy for the relationship, for our partners, that's when we can find our way back and start to break down resentment. That's my first thoughts on it, but that's a work in progress.
I
No,
love it.
no.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's a literal light bulb moment right here on the podcast. I love it.
yeah, it's true. It's like you lose that. I can actually feel it like physically. I get into this mode of like, I'm only going to consider my own feelings and what's going on for me. And I'm not going to, I almost very like, I'm not going to think about you and I'm going to stay in my annoyance and anger and whatever it is. And there's no empathy in those moments. I am not empathizing with anyone apart from myself and my own feelings of rightness and righteousness. And it's when we can kind of step outside of our feelings and empathize with somebody else's that we can start to go, oh yeah, okay, I can understand now, I can get it. Oh, I understand where they're coming from, why they're doing what they're doing. And I think a lot of that also comes through. There's a huge amount of emotional awareness that's necessary to do that. Like, awareness of your own emotions, the awareness to, see someone else's or put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, that's actually a big lesson I learned in conflict resolution is to actually be able to listen to someone else with the intention of understanding their point of view of what
Mm,
their experience is, rather than taking it personally. Like, this is an
mm,
attack on me. This is how they're experiencing things. This is how things are occurring to them. And as David said, yeah, I feel like it can take quite a bit of emotional awareness. Maybe there are certain things that we get triggered by, like, the idea that someone is upset with me might go, oh my God, like now I've ruined everything. And so then I'm not actually listening to what they're saying. I'm now in my head about like, oh my God, I've messed up. But really being able to listen to someone else and go, oh my God, like that's how you're feeling. Like, this is what either my actions or whatever's happening is making you feel. Like, oh, I get it. Like, that's okay. That's not cool. Like, and really understanding that perspective. Yeah.
mm. Mm, mm. I was thinking that, yeah, it's the other thing that was kind of springing to mind is the age old intimacy, right? Sexual intimacy. I'll talk about within relationships, since we've carried on down our road of spotting when your conflict and your relationship might be going the right way and how to freshen that up is around the kind of intimacy part, the sexual intimacy in particular, because I think I think we mentioned it earlier, is like this is a road that a lot of relationships end up flowing down. And I'm often explaining to people, for a few friends even recently, is like you can how you can inject some energy into your sexual intimacy, like how we can as partners and couples can we kind of relight the fire. God, does that take that song?
Yeah.
I can't believe you just did that. That's so funny and so cringy all at the same time. My first thought on, I guess, bringing that spark back, you know, between the sheets is actually not to be between the sheets. Like, come out of the bedroom and be anywhere else being intimate, because it's almost like when you share a bed with somebody and you live with somebody that you are spending so much time, especially during lockdown with, and you're not being intimate, it's almost like so many thoughts are going around in probably unspoken in each partner's head about how they're not being intimate in the bed. I think it's an idea of starting with a simmering, like, the touching and the gentle kiss on the neck and this, that, and the other that are really quite affectionate and soft ways of re-entering that physical space. And I think so many couples do think that they just need to go straight to it and it has to happen in the bedroom. And there's so much pressure associated with
Mm,
that. It's almost like so formal. But when they simmer their way around the house together and they really start to connect emotionally, then they can start to, become more sexual with each other. And often, it's exciting to not be doing it in bed.
Yeah, that's a pro tip right there. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because it's so true, right? Like, well, especially if you've only got one bedroom as well, right? Like, you're just that one bed, and you're so familiar with it, it becomes like the only place that you're ever intimate, and yeah, it sort of loses that novelty, as like that sense of something exciting, something new. Yeah.
The spontaneity.
Yeah. I'm actually I think there's a place for. There's a book by Esther Perel, and what's it called now? Mating Captivity, and she was talking about spontaneity and sex. And one of the lines in the book, and I always remember this, he says, "One partner is always planning sex. One of you's always planning it. One of you's always thought about it. One's thought about the idea of maybe having sex later. So sex is never spontaneous. It's never actually a spontaneous act because one person is always thinking about it beforehand. It's just you might not voice that. You might not put it in the diary and so forth. I'm not that against actually like scheduling sex as something to do. And like like blocking out some time, because I think for lockdown couples and people are living together, one of the things that they feel is they don't have time. Their time is, they don't have time to, by the time it gets to late in the evening, it's like, oh, we're both tired, we've both been working all day, blah, blah, blah. They kind of, the intimacy, the sexual intimacy kind of slips. So like blocking out a allotted period of time, whether that be 2 hours, 3 hours, 45 minutes, for the goal of just being kind of sexually intimate together I think it's a really novel idea. And I also think having sexually intimate times without the goal of having sex, because then you remove that part that can be, can feel like quite a pressure, like I'm actually just exploring together, like, trying something different or new, or touching each other in a way that you wouldn't normally do so. And I like what you said, Sarah, about going somewhere else. Like, I think there's nothing like booking a hotel and going there for the night if you can, because it's a completely different environment. It feels different. You've moved away from your home kitchen office, which is your the place you live in, and you've gone to somewhere that is new and fresh and mysterious, or if it so takes you and you like to be outdoors, you find your nearest forest or uninhabited place, if you really want to be exciting. But just like getting out of the space that you're normally in, especially if you're spending a lot of time working in that space, because I think that after a while, as much as some of you might not believe in the energy of a place, it's like it has a vibe to you. And it's like even my front room now has become my office. It doesn't feel like my front room, which was a place where I used to like relax and chill out and have friends over and talk. Now it's become my place of work, where my laptop is, my work laptop is, and I sit and I breathe away and stuff like that. So to go to a place that has different energy is a big plus point, I think.
Yeah, totally. To reignite the spark for sure. And I think there's this idea that, getting away, especially for couples that have been, cooped up together and it's not really quite happening in or outside of the bedroom in that space, that, going away somewhere is kind of like a sexual safecation, really, isn't it? Where they can really just get a feel for each other. And also, something else that came up for me earlier was that so many couples are tuned in online all the time to their screens, whether it's, laptop or, multi-screening as well, like watching Netflix with the laptop and the phone as well. And so we've constantly got this work mode energy. And then you said earlier about how one partner's always planning sex and the other might be thinking about it, wondering when it's going to happen or whatever, or maybe doesn't voice it at all. And then, they're double or triple screening all day, and then gets to 11 o'clock at night, and then both partners are just supposed to switch it on, and it's just supposed to happen in that in in the bedroom where the two phones are probably on the bedside tables as well. It's like, all this technology isn't conducive to a sexual energy. And so if, I would recommend to anyone tuning in that's thinking about this, it's like, get away and go on your sexual staycation and just absolutely zone into one another and zone out from everything else. Switch your phone off, airplane mode it unless there's some absolute emergency, because at the end of the day, your relationship should be priority, and we almost in this modern day, especially when we're not taking as many breaks, we seem to be working more. I'm hearing a lot of people working more at home during lockdown, and it's about shifting, isn't it? Shifting priorities, and sexual intimacy ought to be up there with, conversations and in relationships to save it as well, or conflicts as well, whatever. It's got to be up there just as much as the rest.
Yeah, it's one of those things where in modern society we don't realize that attention itself is a currency, and it's like we give a lot of it. Where our attention is now more in demand than ever before. The phones, like I think I know Dave, you have, I have as well. Our notifications for most of our apps do not ping up our phone, and there is a lot of interruption. So if we're not actually making a conscious effort in this area, and if we're aware that there's a problem or there is a lack of intimacy, and then we're not doing something about it, to put some more energy in that direction, then nothing's going to improve, and it will just continue to meander along or get worse.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that there should be a no screens in the bedroom rule entirely for all couples. I think, we use the excuse that we need it for our alarm, but there are still alarm clocks that we can purchase that don't, that aren't on our mobile devices. And I think we can charge our phones elsewhere, and the bedroom could be a sacred place of sexual connectivity if we allowed it to be so. But, with TVs at the end of beds and phones on the bedside table and even Kindles, it's like if you really took some time to feng shui your bedroom and made it a place of, sacred sexual energy, then it would be that, it is what you want it to be if you allow it the space. But so many couples just don't, and they think they need to be tuned in, and then they don't, give the attention. They don't do that simmering, and then before you know it, they just expect for them to both switch it on, and it just doesn't happen that way. And I think with all the stress of lockdown, people have stayed connected to the news. They've stayed connected to so many people the best way that they know how, and that's through their phone. And it's almost like lent itself to a compulsive addiction of constant swiping. I sometimes feel like I've got thumbnache because I'm on the emails all day and got repetitive strain. Not a good kind.
In the thumb, I can't agree more. Like I'm actually, I don't. My phone, it goes into my bedroom, but I don't sleep with it there. I actually bought an alarm clock. Um, there was a girl I was dating a couple of years ago, and she had a strict rule: you could not bring your phone into her bedroom. It would be like, I remember once going in there, I was on the phone, and she was like, no, 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 the phone doesn't. No one's phone comes into this bedroom. You leave your phone outside. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. And I was like, oh, that's odd. And then I tried it for a while, and I was like, this is actually really fucking good. Like you just charge your phone in the front room, because the truth is, as I always say, I remember telling my mum and my sisters this. They were like, "Oh, what happens if something happens in the middle of the night?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm not the police or the ambulance, so no one's calling me in the middle of the night. Really, it's like." I was thinking of the story I was reading recently about a guy that won the Nobel Peace Prize. No, Nobel Prize for Science, I think it was. And he's American, but when the prize was announced, it was in like European time, and they couldn't get in contact with him because his phone wasn't inside his bedroom. And I loved it. I was like, that would be me. They're trying to call me. I'm like, nah, it's sleeping time. No, it is
Amazing.
really good because it does suck your attention. Like I think I was reading something somewhere that even when your phone is off and switched off, if it's within view of you, it takes up a certain percentage of your attention.
Yeah, I've also seen the same sort of stat. Like if you're sat at a dinner table and you've got your phone on the table, subtly suggests that everything is more important on that phone than the person that you're with. You
Yeah.
have that right there, just constantly waiting in case someone's going to call.
I was having a drink yesterday afternoon. I took the afternoon off, which is a rarity for me. My gosh, look at me with my work guilt. Which is not making matches or talking relationships. She has guilt about it anyway. So, yesterday took some downtime with my sister, and we were sat outside somewhere, and there was a couple across from us having looked like a date, looked like I don't really know what it looked like actually, disconnect, and they were both sat on their phone the whole time, just staring at social media scrolls, and I was just like, gosh, like they could be at home reading a book, they could be listening to a podcast. I mean, they could be doing anything that really feeds into themselves rather than they look like they're wasting time with each other. I mean, they're not connecting with each other. So is that person in front of you just somebody to pass the time with? Because what I don't understand what's happening here. I know that's probably, a wild judgment. They could have had a really stressful day and but just when I see two people out that are obviously a couple in these real times, it's so rare to be able to get out and have that space and do something that's normalish. And I just thought, gosh, what a waste of time. And that's a massive peeve of mine, wasting time. And that's how it looked. And I guess, if you're in the bedroom and your phone's there, there's far better things that you could be doing. I'm pretty sure of that.
Definitely, definitely. Wow, that's a quite an episode. I've realized that we didn't get on to the bit we were expecting to, but that's how things flow sometimes. It's been a wonderful hour of talking about, relationships, the things that kind of come up that cause conflict and that can cause breakup, especially in this current time. And also we've given a healthy dose of like, how you can take yourself out of the mire of the general lockdown life and experience some more excitement. So I think it's been wonderful. Sorry about you guests who were looking for, advice about your getting over your breakups. Maybe that will come in the next time we have Sarah on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked so much about how to prevent a breakup and how to, connect and become closer in your couple and overcome conflicting situations that, we didn't really talk about the pain and the grief of breakup. But here's hoping listeners don't really get to the breakup stage. But if
Yes,
you are in that, we'll
exactly.
talk about that another time.
I think it speaks for itself, Sarah, that that you were concerned. It was like a concern of yours. You're like, I'm seeing so many breakups, and especially in this industry where you're a matchmaker, it's like this is a solution. Here we go. Here is a whole ream of advice that you can take to really help support your relationship and avoid getting to a point where the frustrations could upset the balance and create a breakup where otherwise there wouldn't be, because we are in a period of time with increased stress and fear in the air, and there's a lot of tensions rising. But I think there's so much gold in this episode about how to communicate better and avoid those things.
Yeah. And I think when you commit to somebody and you are in an established relationship, you have a responsibility to really kind of take ownership and know your stuff about this. Otherwise you do run the risk of wasting their time and wasting your own, and it's so precious. So I think everyone should really clue up on what connects a couple together rather than just riding the wave and hoping that it's just going to be plain sailing, which it never is, because this is life.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I actually think like it's one of those things that I know for a lot of men we don't think about. We're just thinking about like getting into a relationship. We're not thinking about what it takes to sustain one, and it's not something that's often spoken about. Like imagine a school where you get taught how to actually be in a relationship, and to go the long, to go the long haul, because it does take work. And it's something often I think, as you just said, people get into it and think, oh, this is it now. I'm in one now. It's just gonna ride along, and I just have to sit back and enjoy it.
So true. It really is. It's so true.
I think a lot of people just think that once you're in a relationship, it's all going to be pretty easy from there. Whether that's a relationship or a marriage, it's just thinking that, oh, once I'm in, I'm done. I've done all the hard work. Now it's easy. But it's like it's continual work. Continually having to work at it and talk and communicate and come up with new and fresh ideas as well. It's something just you got to keep on doing. It's a bit like the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's true. And modern dating is, really hard. But when you get to the relationship, that is just the beginning. It might take a long while in these surreal times to find a relationship, but when you've got one and you care so deeply and there's so much love there, you've got to do all it takes to kind of nurture that and be integral to yourself and learn how to communicate, that love and that care and overcome, difficult and intricate situations so you can land yourself on the same page. And, it's all about doing the work, isn't it? And doing the work about what you want is good and it's helpful and it's necessary. But when you get, into a committed relationship with that person that you envisaged or maybe not, and when you get to that place, you do have that responsibility. I think that's so key, and we should carry on learning about ourselves and our partners and about what we're willing to accept and creating boundaries around what we're not.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's so true. We need to create a school for relationship learning.
I actually had
That
a
would be
dream
fun.
where this was the case, but this is
Oh, really?
for another time. We'll be going on for 2 hours.
Easy.
It's always the case, isn't it? We can never shut up when we get together.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We'll leave him with a cliffhanger.
So Sarah, where can our listeners hear more about you or work with you?
Listeners can head to lovelessonsglobal.com if they'd like to, look into spending some time together, sharing the space, and maybe they're on a journey to finding love, or maybe they're in a relationship and they want to learn about communication and how to sustain it, or what they want and if it's serving them. So yeah, www.lovelessonsglobal.com.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And as you said, we always feel like we can talk forever about the subjects of relationships and dating. But it's an
Thanks
absolute
for
pleasure to
having
have you
me.
on.
I really, really loved it. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Amazing.
So listeners, until next week, we'll have to say ciao.
Ciao, ciao. So that was an amazing conversation. I feel like we could always go on and talk forever with Sarah.
Yeah, so easy to talk to. Like I remember when we did the radio show with her, we just like talked and talked and talked about dating, and it's just she has a real deep knowledge of the industry. 10 years in the game, 10 years talking about dating and love and relationships, working with men and women from all over the world. So it's like she's really coming from a place of not just lived her own experience, but also the many experiences of people that she's coming into contact with and coaching and advising and matching constantly.
Yeah, you can definitely hear it in her answers, and I love the way that she thinks about things. In fact, I love the fact that she had some new ideas even on this podcast, some light bulb moments. Yeah. I mean, relationship resuscitation. There you go, guys. Resuscitate your relationship. This is it's a big thing. So we live in such a easy throwaway culture. I feel, or at least I feel like that's how it was passing through it, right? And there's a lot to be gained from learning to deal with conflict and actually commit to a partner and bring that responsibility to a relationship. I suppose in a way you could refer to it as maturing. It's a mature way to have a relationship. You're not just and actually, as life goes on, you tend to appreciate that even more. The longer you're in a relationship, you appreciate the conflicts and the way you're able to come through things. It does really bring you closer.
Yeah, it does. And it's, I think, when you're in your immature years, and I'd say talking for myself, it's like conflict was always really, really bad. Like, oh God, there's conflict. It's my fault. Not blame actually for me. It was like, oh, it's all my fault. And it still comes up for me, that blame, but I'm a bit more aware now to go, okay, I'm doing that thing where I'm blaming myself for all this when actually it's no one's fault. It's just something that's happened that needs to be cleared up. And having the conversation isn't about blame. I think Sarah said something in there is really good. She was like, instead of speaking from you did this and you did that, and we talk from me and my, like, I am feeling this way. I think I is a very powerful way, because you are taking responsibility and ownership of what's going on for you instead of projecting it and blaming it on someone else, your partner. So yeah, it's a great episode. So much gold, so much good knowledge about actually really making a relationship work. Because as Ahmad said, it's like very easy to just end a relationship and find a new one. But the truth is, you just end up in the same fucking problems.
Yeah.
Because you're still there.
Yeah. In a way, I mean, I don't know how many people will feel the same, but I feel like this episode is very healing in its own way. It's speaking into a problem that's really big, conflicts and people just not being able to communicate how they feel, and then they feel isolated in their own relationship, as opposed to being able to speak and then feel close again and heard. So yeah, well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. That was an amazing conversation, and if you'd like to know anything more about anything we spoke about, do get in touch. Our email is hello@authenticdatingseries.com. We love receiving your questions and answering and having dialogue and learning more about how we can help you and the real challenges you face in dating.
Yeah, just get in contact. And if you're looking for some coaching as well, we also coach men who are in relationship as well. It's not just single men we deal with. So if that's something, dealing with conflicts, expressing your emotions is something you're interested in, or ways in which you can grow in the sexual and emotional intimacy in a relationship, then drop us a message, and you can arrange a free coaching call with us.
Well, thanks guys. If there's nothing else, we'll see you next week.
Cool. Ciao.